online.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Auto Supply Chain 2022 conference with the theme Environment Friendly Agile Supply Chain. This is the concluding session on ESG. It's really my pleasure to request Madam Tulsi, co-chairperson of CII National Committee on Logistics, Managing Director and Accountable Manager for Blue Dart Aviation, which is India's first scheduled domestic cargo airline and longest serving private airline carrier. Madam has been associated with Blue Dart for 27 years, having been involved in the launch of Blue Dart Aviation and with the airline industry for over 5 decades. Over to Madam Tulsi. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhanu. A very good afternoon to all our viewers, our distinguished panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our session on environment, social, and governance during this Auto Supply Chain 2022 conference. The automotive industry is a significant contributor to our economy, accounting for about 6% of our GDP and contributing 35% to manufacturing. It's also a very large employer with close to 4 million direct employees and 27 million indirect employees. The past 2 years, as we are all aware, have been quite challenging. And while we have seen a sizable increase in offtake in terms of e-vehicles, the base is still quite low, and the revenues are still lagging behind the 2019 levels, though future prospects or projections are optimistic. So in this dynamic environment where companies really have to manage their risks, geopolitical disruption, climate change, there is also the increasing pressure of ESG compliance. So therefore, some of the questions that come to mind are, is ESG really here to stay? Can it deliver long-term benefits? Or is it just another newfangled idea? What are companies doing in terms of managing their health and safety of their employees and workers' rights? Is there a measure that would give us a reference and perpetuate ESG in terms of contributing, or perhaps giving a measurement that India can contribute to support our Make in India vision? We have with us a panel of experts with decades of experience in the automotive industry and also hands-on sustainability practice to share their knowledge and best practices with us. And so with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I must say that all CVs are long and very impressive, but in the interest of time, I am regrettably forced to abridge it to a short introduction. So the first speaker is Dr. Aditya Gupta, COO, Supply Chain Management Center, Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. The Supply Chain Center is one of the centers of excellence at IIM Bangalore. Dr. Gupta was part of the corporate world for 23 years, occupying various positions of responsibility, and has been a supply chain practitioner before becoming a supply chain teacher. His most recent position was as business head at TVS Supply Chain Solutions. So over to you, Dr. Gupta, who would be sharing a presentation on risk mitigation and adaptation.
Good afternoon and greetings to all. Thanks, Tulsi, for introducing me to the audience. Many thanks to CII Institute of Logistics, Dr. Bhanumati, Sham, for inviting me to this particular conference, and extremely pleased to be among all of you. So let me try to share my presentation. Is it visible to all?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, so the title of my presentation today is Climate Change Adaptation, an Existential Imperative. So whenever we talk about climate change action, we talk about reducing GHG emissions, we talk about renewable energy, we talk about electrification of transportation, we talk about building circularity into businesses. So all these particular actions are extremely important and fall in the category of what we call as a climate change mitigation action. There are another set of actions around building resilience to climate impact, what we call as a climate change adaptation actions. So in this entire presentation, I will argue that adaptation actions are as important, if not more, as compared to mitigation action for business continuity. I will also talk about as to how adaptation will determine the winners and losers in future. World Economic Forum comes with a study every year, which they call as a global risk report. And the chart that is there in front of you is the report for 2022. Now, if you see this particular chart, the top 3 and the 5 among the top 10 are occupied by climate-related risk. The first 2 risks, the climate action failure and extreme weather, were the top 2 risks across all the 3 categories of near-term, mid-term, and long-term risk. Most of the experts believe that the next biggest global crisis, which is going to hit us after COVID pandemic, is going to originate from climate change. There are 3 pictures in front of you which appeared in media in August of this year. The first picture, the picture number 1 on the left hand side, shows the dried riverbed of river called Danube River in Europe, which along with the Rhine is the 2 most prominent river in Europe. Now, Europe this year, because of the long heat wave and insignificant rainfalls, both Rhine and Danube faced really dry spells there, and the river beds became prominent. Come to picture number 2, and the story is almost the same. So this is a river called Yangtze River in China. In China also faced almost 11 weeks of continuous unprecedented heat wave, and that also lead to drying of this river called Yangtze River, which is the most prominent river for China, which flows across the country from west to east. Yangtze was also very important in terms of hydroelectricity and navigation, and both these particular activity came to halt because of drying of the river. The third picture that you see on the top is a picture from Pakistan. Pakistan faced unprecedented floods in this year, where almost more than 3.5 crore people were impacted. And if you have seen the statement which came from their senior management, including their prime minister, everybody blamed these particular floods on climate change. Now, what is common to these particular 3 pictures is these 3 pictures show the extreme weather condition, and they are occurring in the same month of August this year. Let me talk about India this year. The picture number 1 shows the flood which happened in Uttarakhand and Dehradun last October. Now, it was extremely unusual to have such kind of a rainfall and such kind of a floods to happen in the month of October, which happened last year. The picture number 2 shows the heat waves that entire North India faced this year during the month of March and April. The average temperature that we recorded in the month of March and April this year were the highest for the century. The third picture that you see is the picture of Bangalore city last month during floods, which brought a lot of fame to the city. So maybe India was not subject to the kind of extreme weather condition that Pakistan or China was subjected to, but maybe this year was a lucky year for us. Maybe 2023 or 24 may not be as lucky for us. I would like to draw your attention to some of the headlines which appeared in the media. If you look below, Europe's worst drought in 500 years. China records heat wave, worst drought in decades. Or another caption was for China was heat wave could be among the worst recorded in global history. Pakistan floods were described as country's worst flooding in a decade. North temperature were described as highest temperature recorded in a century. Now, the key word that are appearing with it are unprecedented, worst, once in a decade. So these are the captions which are coming along with it. So what it indicates is the first two risks that we spoke about in the first slide in terms of failure of climate action and extreme weather conditions. So the climate impact is hitting us much sooner than what we anticipated. It is right at our door. Now, let's talk about what is the climate change impact that we are facing. So climate change can lead to heat waves, which can bring drought, wildfires, as we saw in Europe and China. It can lead to floods, as we saw in Pakistan. Due to warming of sea ocean, it can lead to rise in sea levels. It can lead to typhoons. It can lead to cyclones, landslide, as we have seen. Now, how can these particular climate change impacts impact our businesses? So I'm talking about four scenarios here. So this can happen next year. It can happen anytime in future also. So first is that there is a flooding, and because of flooding, there is a flooding of our factories also. Now, this particular incident happened this year also. So Imami Limited have a factory at a place called Pacharia in Assam. And when the Assam floods happened this year, so their factory was also flooded. Scenario number two could be that suppose there is a textile or a garment manufacturing company, and that particular factory faces a drought for 2 years. If textile and garment is extremely high on water, so if there is no water for consumption or drinking, how the water will come for manufacturing? Scenario three is let's talk about a tea company which is into business of manufacturing and distributing tea. Now, due to rise in temperature, due to change in the precipitation level, if the variety of tea tree either stops growing or maybe the output really reduces, then you can imagine the impact it will have on the business of that particular company. Scenario four could be that employees of a company are not able to reach their offices or head office due to rising sea levels or floods. This can happen at Bagbe Reclamation in Mumbai or maybe a Balandur or a Sarjapur in Bangalore. Before I proceed, I will just talk about the mitigation strategy. When we talk about mitigation strategy, we are talking about decarbonizing the entire value chain. So it may start from maybe a responsible sourcing, eco-designing our product, and building energy efficiencies in our manufacturing, using renewable energy, building circularity into entire business. Now, what can these particular strategy achieve for us? So they can definitely reduce the carbon emission, they can save energy for us, and even the cost also for us. They will allow us to meet the regulation. They can improve our image in the eyes of investors, in the eyes of customers, in the eyes of employees and others also. But the moot question is, will these particular actions, okay, so let's assume that there is a company which becomes carbon neutral next year. Okay, so it is a net zero carbon company which is there. Now, can a carbon neutral company meet these particular four scenarios? Let me take another example. Okay, so let's talk about one particular person who has been smoking for 50 years. Now, due to this particular continuous smoking that he has done for 50 years, he has damaged his lungs. Now, there are two options available to this particular person. One, he reduces his smoking or completely quits his smoking. Second option that he has is to build some kind of an adaptive capacity in his body where the body organs try to reduce the impact of damaged lungs on the other parts of the body. Okay, so that's option number two. Now, suppose he completely quits smoking, but he does nothing about as far as option 2 is concerned, where building an adaptive capacity in the body. Now, will the particular person survive or not survive? So the answer to that particular question is that if the person has to survive for long, then he has to build an adaptive capacity in his body. He has to manage his damaged lung so that they don't harm the rest of the body. So this building of this kind of a resilience is what we call as in climate change adaptation. So So adaptation is the means of risk management for risk which is arising from climate change, or in simple words, coping to the consequences of climate change. So there is an official definition also which is available from IPCC for adaptation. Now there could be two types of adaptation: reactive adaptation and proactive adaptation. So suppose our office at Bellandur had floods this year, and we will relocate our office from Bellandur to some other location. So that's a reactive adaptation. But a proactive adaptation would mean that we try to identify all possible scenarios, and then we try to build some kind of a robustness and resilience into entire our system, is what we call as a proactive adaptation. One more slide in terms of what is the difference between mitigation and adaptation. So there is a definition difference which is there, but I would like to draw your attention to row number 3 and row number 4. So when a company takes up mitigation strategies, the beneficiaries is the entire public. When they reduce GHG emissions, everybody is getting benefited out of it. But when a company takes adaptation action, which could be either building flood walls, or building climate resistant crop varieties, or doing some kind of a migration or relocation, or maybe any other action that they take, who is the beneficiary? Beneficiary is the organization themselves. Okay. So the impact of climate adaptation action is mostly private and local as compared to the impact of climate mitigation. So though climate adaptation is so critical, but if you look at the share of climate adaptation in terms of funding, in terms of mind space, in terms of attention, in terms of focus, it is not even 1/10 of what the climate mitigation enjoys. I would like to talk about few case studies of climate change adaptation. So one of the agriculture is extremely vulnerable to climate change, and one of the crops which is very vulnerable to climate change is a coffee, particularly Arabica variety. Now there are companies like Starbucks, Nestle, and other companies which are doing a lot of action in terms of adaptation of coffee. So they are trying to introduce climate resistant coffee variety. They are trying to build shade cover over their farms. They are trying to improve soil, water, and pest management also. Okay. Now let me again talk about an imaginary scenario. Okay, so maybe 3 years, 5 year, 10 year down the line, we cross that particular tipping point, and after crossing that particular tipping point, suppose because of climate change, the output of coffee plants really goes down. Now, this may impact their competition, say a Costa Coffee or a Tim Horton and other people who have not really done any kind of an exercise in terms of climate adaptation, maybe truly impacted by this. But if Starbucks have really uh, done adaptation exercise and really built climate resistant coffee variety, they can be winner in this entire exercise. How well a company manages a crisis or a disaster as compared to its competition can build a significant competitive advantage for a company. Another case study, there is a place called Malmo in Sweden, which was plagued by recurrent floods which were happening. To manage this, they built what they call as a sustainable urban drainage system. So they built two large canals at the center of the city, and the entire drainage system was built parallel to the roads. by which the entire flooding water will go to these particular canals and from these canals into sea. So once they have built this entire sustainable urban drainage system, there are no floods which are happening at Malmo for last 8 years. And this is the kind of a solution that we need at places like Delhi and Bangalore as far as our country is concerned. Maldives, which is very close to us, it's the lowest lying country with 192 islands. And Maldives again is extremely susceptible and vulnerable to threat of rising sea and wave actions. Now, they are also taking a large number of adaptive actions. They are continuously dredging sands, and by dredging sand, they are creating a buffer zone between the settlement area and the sea coast. So that is what Maldives is trying. Beside that, they are doing other things also. This is an example of a place in Iowa. So this particular city is to manage against floods. They are building these particular flood walls that you see. Plus, they are trying to raise the height of their bridges also, and they are trying to build some kind of a levee in their river so that they can minimize the impact of floods on the city. Red Cross is one of the largest humanitarian organizations which really helps victims with food, water, and medicines. Now, what Red Cross is trying to do is they are trying to work with climate scientists to build what they call as an early warning system. So, if the early warning system can create signals for them, they can warn the people who are going to be impacted. They can provide food, water, and medical supplies to the impacted population before the event happens. So this is an adaptation exercise that Red Cross is doing. Miami is another city which is extremely vulnerable to a rise of sea level, and they are running a program called Rising Above. So where they are installing massive drain pipes, pumps, raising roads, strengthening sea walls to guard against or building a climate resilience. In India also, there are a lot of actions which are being taken. So NABARD is a key stakeholder which sponsors various adaptation projects. So there are projects around the watershed development or coastal resources to guard against rising sea level, supporting small and marginal farmers also. But that is on the community side. So let me visit to the business side as to how business can build adaptation into their mainstream. Now, this particular framework that you see is being suggested by IPCC. It has got three parts: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. So hazard is any climate-related occurrence, which could be flood, drought, rise in sea levels, and others. Exposure is the degree to which the system is exposed to a given hazard. So suppose our factory is quite far away from sea, so then we are not exposed to a sea level rise. Vulnerability is the degree to which the system can be affected by the climate hazard. And when there is an overlap between hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, there is a climate change risk that the company is facing. So if I go back to my example of Imami Limited, so there was a hazard of flooding and they were exposed to it and they were vulnerable to it. So that's a climate change risk that they are facing in years to come. Now, managing this particular adaptation. So there is a what we call as a para model of adaptation. So it says you can first that you can do is to protect yourself. So we can build a flood walls, or we can develop an irrigation system, or maybe we can buy insurance also. So these particular actions is what we call as a protect actions against climate action. Then either we can, if we are able to build resilience, or if the product solutions are too costly, then we live with those particular risks is what we call as an accommodate action. If we relocate our offices or our factory to a less risk location, so that's what we call as a retreat. So relocating offices and factories are not easy. So one of the key things that the company should do is that they should try to build their future offices, factories at locations which are away from coastals or away from floodplains, so that they can completely de-risk themselves or low risk themselves. These are certain frameworks which are available for climate change adaptation. So I will not go into details of these particular frameworks. So this is an IPCC framework where we identify the various risks. And once we identify the risk, we identify the various options which are available. So we assess, we select the option, and finally we adopt our climate change adaptation action. A similar kind of a framework which is also there, where we again identify challenges, assess our risk and vulnerability, identify option, get the funding for these particular options, and then prepare plan, take action, and monitor and evaluate. This is another framework which is available for adaptation, which is called pathway framework. Yeah, so I will not go into details of this particular framework also. So I would like to end my presentation with two quotes. So this is a very famous quote that we have studied during our biology years in school time also, but I would like to read it for everybody. So it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is one that is most adaptable to change will survive. And this is what is true for businesses in terms of climate change. And I would like to leave the audience with this particular quote, which is one of my favorite quotes. We have not inherited the earth from our fathers, we have borrowed it from our children. So, so, so all the people who are listening to this particular webinar, so I would say that please do not take climate action, whether it is mitigation or whether adaptation, for for investors, for your CEO, for your CSO, for your customers, for your employees. Please take climate action for yourself and for your children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta. You paint a scary picture, but I guess it's only when we're scared that we tend to take serious action. So maybe there could still be a positive outcome. But I shall move on to our next speaker, that is Mr. Madhusudanan. He's the General Manager, ESG, Sustainability at Ashok Leyland. Mr. Madhusudan has 25 years of experience, spanning a wide range of activities in the automotive industry, learning and development, corporate HR, manufacturing, process engineering, research and development, program management, and costing. So Ashok Leyland is a well-established and reputed organization with a very large workforce, comparatively, that has successfully sustained its operations for close to 8 decades. It would be interesting to learn from you, Madhusudanan. How do you view ESG across the entire gamut of activities, from procurement to process, the end product, and the final disposal? And while we move to greener, less polluting e-vehicles, how do you deal with the disposal of batteries? That has been one area of concern. And how do you ensure the procurement process is environment friendly? Not all of it may be related to logistics, but we could learn from your best practices and possibly adapt them to our individual situations. So over to you, Madhusudanan.
Thank you, Tulsi. Thanks to CII and thanks to Aditya for setting up the context. Good afternoon to the co-panelists and the audience. Yes, I would like to cover this, your question into my answer into 3 parts. The first is with respect to how do we look at the overall automotive value chain. It is important to look at the automotive value chain in entirety. I would like to explain this through the well-to-wheel concept or the approach. In this well-to-wheel concept, well corresponds to the crude oil source or the raw material, and wheel corresponds to the automotive wheel, which moves the product from point A to point B. This can be further subdivided into well to tank and tank to wheel. When you talk about well to tank, this talks about all the operations and the carbon footprint which is associated right from the raw material extraction till we make the finished goods. And tank to wheel corresponds to all the activities which happens post sales at the customer end till the disposal and end of life. So it is very important and pertinent to note that the sustainability initiatives and ESG practices should focus on right from the raw material extraction phase till end of life. Only then we will be able to get a benefit. I would like to give an example of a diesel fired automobile and a electric vehicle. The electric vehicle give a zero tailpipe emission, whereas a diesel fired automobile gives an Euro 6 compliant emission. But unless and otherwise we look at the life cycle emissions of an electric vehicle and a diesel vehicle, we will not be able to get practical comparisons, because even an electric vehicle is going to take considerable carbon footprint on account of raw materials, because it contains rare earth materials like nickel, cobalt, and tin. As well as for the charging infrastructure, we are going to use both renewable energy as well as non-renewable energy source. So this is point number one. Point number two is ESG. Does it come with a cost, or is it going to play a role in cost effectiveness for an organization? If you look at the challenges of India is quite different from the developing nations. In India, we are looking at growth of the economy as well as the GDP. We want to keep the USP of low cost of operations, and we need to improve the quality of life of individuals. At the same time, we want to drive through a low carbon economy. So these are our challenges, and there is a trade-off between economic growth as well as the low carbon economy. So if you can just take the Indian logistic market as such, this is roughly corresponds to around $200 billion market, and this is around 13 to 14% of the GDP. If you look at the overall logistic cost and part of the GDP, this is quite high when you compare it with the developed markets, which is in the region of 9%. I think enhancement of the efficiency of the overall automotive value chain and increasing the performance of the ESG parameters, which is enabled through the various policies such as the National Logistic Policy, the Gati Shakti Mission Plan, the PLIs, and the Unified Logistic Platforms. These have to contribute towards increasing the efficiency, thereby reducing the overall logistic cost from the current level of 14% to say 8 or 9%, matching with the global players like Germany or US. This I think we can achieve by contributing more to the renewables, increasing the energy productivity, reducing the energy cost, and introducing circularity in our business. This is point number two. ESG would act as a value contributor and reduce the cost in the long run. My third point is with respect to how is it being practiced in Ashok Leyland, and what are the various best practices which Ashok Leyland as an organization is practicing. I would like to first start with G and then with S and then with E, because E being a familiar topic for many people. G stands for governance, and Ashok Leyland as part of governance, we have constituted the ESG committee, one of the first automobile companies to constitute a ESG committee at the board level, which is being chaired by an independent director. And the ESG committee meets on a quarterly basis and then provides directions on the vision, strategy, governance, review mechanism, and the overall process. This is very, very important. When we begin the ESG practices, it has to start from top down. And then the leadership commitment needs to be there. And this is very, very significant. And as a part of the governance, we have been doing this voluntary disclosures as part of the sustainability reporting. We have been doing this for the past 5 years. We are following the GRI framework. And we are, because of this, we are geared up for taking up the mandatory SEBI-regulated BRSR, the BRSR framework, which is going to become mandated from the next year. So this is on the governance front. Now moving to the social pillar, we are focusing on 4 key themes here. Diversity, equity and inclusion, community development, health and safety, and fair labor practices. In terms of giving some examples of the initiatives what Ashok Leyland is doing to drive ESG, first of all, the CSR practices which are happening for the past 7 years as a well-oiled machinery is dovetailed and comes under the ESG umbrella. That's what we have done. And our CSR initiative currently is focusing on 2 important factors, which is the education. As part of the Road to School initiative, we are touching the lives of 1 lakh children, covering 1,000 schools, as well as the Jal Jeevan Yojana, which focuses on water management initiatives, targeting communities, focusing on providing solutions on lake rejuvenation or water ATMs and spring shed management, etc. And this is clearly dovetailed with the overall ESG umbrella. In terms of capability building, we have a very robust mechanism of training the driver community, the mechanic community through 3 initiatives. One is they are being trained through the driver training centers, which are there in Ashok Leyland across the geography, the service training centers across the geography. And also we have a very unique concept called as knowledge on wheels. The knowledge on wheels is a training center on wheels. So it is designed in such a way that it goes to different parts of India and trains the drivers and mechanics and then upskills them. We see that India as a country is quite prone for road accidents. We see it has a 5 lakh recorded accidents every year, and there are 1.5 lakh recorded deaths. We feel that by capability building and competency building of the drivers and mechanics, it will significantly enhance their driving skills, thereby reducing the accidents and fatalities. And not only that, it will also enhance the overall fuel efficiency, thereby increasing the energy productivity. The last part is a familiar topic, which is the environment part. Yes, Aditya spoke in the alarmist way, but I think it is possible if all corporates join hands with respect to taking commitments on the environment. In terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, what Ashok Leyland is currently practicing is that we have embraced solar and wind. And our energy, renewable energy share mix is to the tune of 71%. It is one of the highest in the automotive industry. And thereby we are able to reduce the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. In terms of water management, we are able to recycle our water. And for the past 4 years, we have been able to remain water positive, which has been assured by a assurance agency. So this has also resulted in cost reduction. Third, we have been doing measures on energy productivity, like various measures like LED lighting and other things, which has significantly lowered the energy cost. We have also been contributing with respect to zero waste to landfill. 8 out of 9 of our factories are adopting zero waste to landfill, and this is also improving the overall climate. Our corporate office building is a green certified platinum LEED building, which contributes to green and energy efficiency. Last but not the least, we are contributing to carbon sequestration, which is like carbon capture through biodiversity by planting 7 lakh plus trees by following a very unique technique called as the Miyawaki urban forestation mechanism in both our factories as well as our affiliates. And this has helped us capture the carbon back, and also which will help us to lower the carbon footprint. So in a nutshell, summary is that the ESG practices needs to be done end to end, well to wheel. That's number one. Number two, ESG doesn't add up to the cost. It is not a fad. It is on a long run. It is going to make us cost effective. The third thing is that sharing best practices on ESG practices like this is going to help us on collective growth. That's the take from my side. Tulsi.
Thank you, Madhusudanan. That was really very enlightening, and you have a lot to share. I think a lot of good practices that you've implemented in your organization. I'll come back to you with a follow-up question on that. But for now, I'll move on to our next speaker, which is Mr. Sanjay Khare, Vice President, Sustainability, Skoda Volkswagen India. Mr. Khare is an alumnus of IIT Kanpur and has been associated with major Japanese and European automotive OEMs in the Indian subcontinent for 35 years across the diverse functions of manufacturing, HR, quality, safety, and sustainability. He is currently the Chief Sustainability Catalyst, guiding actions at Skoda Auto, Volkswagen India, together with the sister brands of Audi, Porsche, and Lamborghini. As part of my question to you, Sanjay, is as part of an international automotive organization that is focused on engineering excellence, well-known German engineering, what are your views on ESG? Do you see any gaps in the implementation in the Indian scenario? What are the challenges given the constrained situation of the past 2 years, and how have you handled them? Over to you, please, Mr. Khare.
Thank you, Tulsi, and thank you, CIA, for having me. And I think I should thank Aditya and Madhusudanan for already setting the very good context on these topics, both the topics of climate mitigation as well as adaptation. So now my job becomes easier. I have to come to the straight away to the next step. So climate change is real and climate change is here. That's what Aditya has shown us with the wonderful photographs. I'll just give some numbers. From 1850 till 1850 till 2020, almost 2,400 gigatons of CO2 has got admitted into the atmosphere. It says that there is only a budget left of another 500 gigatons so that the Earth doesn't cross a safe limit of 1.5 degrees centigrade of global warming. In the last 10 years, it has been emitting almost 41 gigatons per year. So that means we've got just a very, very small boundary time left of another 10 years, maximum a decade, where we come down to zero emissions. Most of us globally have set up big targets that we want to become carbon neutral by 2050. India has also taken a target to become carbon neutral by 2070. However, things have to move much, much faster. If we really want to see if this equation is getting satisfied, a lot of innovations will be needed on carbon sequestration and such technologies. But however, Europe is going in a big way. As you asked a question about from my European lineage part, yes, we have decided a mission called Go to Zero. And Go to Zero says that by 2050, we have to become totally zero emissions across the entire life cycle of the vehicle, right from resource extraction to logistics supply chain, manufacturing, then use phase, as well as the final disposal phase, precisely what Madhusudan was talking about. We have seen where the emissions lie. 2% of emissions are in our own manufacturing. Maybe around 13% is in the logistics and extraction part. Huping, almost 70% to 75% comes in the use phase, where I'm talking about the internal combustion engine, and 5% belong to the final phase of disposal phase. Europe is going in a big way towards electric, and they target that by 2030 or so, they'll have almost 70% electric vehicles on the market. India's projection is almost 30% by 2030, precisely because it's all about the availability of the green energy, the charging infrastructure, the development of the technology, the range anxiety, everything. India is moving very, very fast, at least on two-wheelers and three-wheelers right now. I hope four-wheelers also will move. Europe, I'm observing that even, big companies like Triton and all or Scania, they're moving big in direction of electrification of even the trucks. And maybe tomorrow the vehicle will be available as a service. It will not be available to buy. The new business models also are being worked upon so that a vehicle is utilized to the full extent and it's available as a service. The time you want it is there to you. The new word is called sustainable mobility. Sustainable mobility for the generations to come is a new topic. It's not about only making the cars and supplying them in the market. So it's all about taking the full responsibility for the entire value chain that will come to the manufacturers. Now, here comes the next part, is that what we can do. Number one thing is that we can, whatever is our own areas of implementation, we can demonstrate excellence into that. Same way what Madhusudan has said about Ashok Leyland, we have also done it. We have installed hooping around 18.5 megawatts of solar power, which is caters to almost 30% of our renewable energy requirements. As of now, we are in the process of coming to the next level by doing some captive purchases, captive investments on solar power outside and improve it. However, we have to see about the economics part. That time I'm talking yesterday, I was talking on a MSME convention on this topic with CIA Mumbai, and again with MSME also, and even us, we are very much always looking forward to from where do we get the investments. So we have to first of all see that whatever new technology, green tech we are bringing is number one, cost effective. Today's date, solar is really cost effective. If 1 megawatt costs around 3.5 crores, and you get a payback within 3 to 4 years of time. However, there are business models which I used over here. Was another smart one that I tried to find out, a Canadian mutual fund, pension fund funded company who would invest total money with us, and we made an arrangement for 25 years with them. And based upon this business model, I'm getting energy from my rooftop only, without without any investment of mine. Instead of buying at 8 rupees from the government department, I'm getting at 3 rupees 60 paise. So this is one other business model which is a possibility for many small corporates or big corporates also. We have also become zero waste organization. We have also become a water positive organization and zero liquid discharge organization. We are investing much more into our surroundings so that we have got a good social license to operate in the region. We get a lot of support from the nearby regions. We've got very good thriving biodiversity inside our plants. We've got our own butterfly parks, which are basically acting as pollinators. We have seen, in spite of the big level of industrialization we have done, our number of species have gone up from 250 to 330 the last 5 years of time. We do regular biodiversity studies. We have taken up a big mangrove plantation in Maharashtra only, where we have planted almost 6.5 lakhs mangroves. Mangroves are a very big carbon sink because they store the carbon dioxide in the roots areas. So these are the various areas which we have done on mitigation. But one more important thing which we are working right now is we are the first company in the country who have joined hands with CII's Center of Excellence from Delhi office, CII-ISD, on which we are working on sustainable value chain initiative. So we centrally, along with some 10 of our suppliers and 6 of our dealers, we are working on a pilot where we are implementing 4 things: decarbonization, circular economy, health and safety, and human rights. Now, these are the 4 areas on which we are working on the first year pilot, and basically requesting everybody to share the various emissions data, and let's analyze those emissions data and let's see where all we can improve it. Everything starts with a recognition of where do we lie right now. So we'll find that there's a lot of potential existing to decarbonize, potential on circular economy. 6 areas that our group has guided us: decarbonization, circular economy, then responsibility in supply chain and business, diversity, and after diversity comes how do we really gear up for the future human capital, because the future is going to be highly digital. I mean, now this future is going to be electric and digital in a very, very big way. The time of autonomous cars is not very far off. Connected mobility is not very far off. So we have to really develop that the technology and people in that direction. And while we are developing the technology and people for the future, we have to see that these new innovations are not leaving any negative impacts on the entire life cycle of the. For example, if today's date you have put on windmills, they are just killing the various Indian bustards which are there. I mean, the birds. So we have to find out a lot of methods. There are 3 major challenges: climate change, loss of nature or biodiversity, or inequalities. What Adit shows in one of the first slides, the key challenges, they do not really go away. This is my first part. I think I will not evolve more right now, but I think there are very important challenges if you talk about the logistics sector, particularly with my ground experiences, is all about health and safety and human rights that we have to talk about. It's a growing sector, very big sector. Just in the festival time itself, recent festival time, the annual sales of all this, I mean, e-commerce companies almost 40,000 crores. So just see entire value chain of logistics part, right from manufacturing to warehousing to transportation across the roads, across the air, then final distribution from the warehouse and last mile connectivity. It involves a lot of movement, a lot of people are involved, and a lot of challenges are involved, particularly on the health and safety aspects. Maybe I can cover it at the end of it. Thank you, Tulsi. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, apologies. Thank you very much, Sanjay. I think your last sentences really lead smoothly into the next speaker, what the next speaker has to say, and that is Mr. Vasu Ramanujam, who's the partner growth and strategy of Koi Reader. I looked up Koi Reader and I was quite fascinated with the name of your organization, but I'll leave you to explain it, Mr. Vasu. So Mr. Vasu is an alumnus of the National Institute of Industrial Engineering and JNTU College of Engineering. He has over 3 decades of experience in technology, consulting, and manufacturing. Koi Reader is a global award-winning Freight Tech 100 company with maritime logistics, trade, and supply chain expertise. So taking on from what Sanjay has said just now in terms of logistics, technology has really brought about some amazing innovations and revolutionary ideas that have taken logistics to the next level. We'd like to hear from you more about the automation initiatives of your organization and how they have contributed to ESG, Vasu. So over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Tulsi, and thanks, CII and Dr. Banu for having me. Not easy to follow in the footsteps of the people who have preceded me, but I will try and do my best. I'd like to start with a couple of slogans. The first one is, in the 1970s, Indian Oil Corporation conducted a national slogan competition. They wanted a slogan for themselves. And this was done through the newspapers in those days. And one of the entries that came in was, little drops of water make the mighty ocean. Little drops of Indian oil make the mighty nation. That was somebody had, that was somebody's idea of a slogan for Indian oil. So that's one slogan. The other one is a slogan that has been used over the decades by the company that I used to work for earlier, which is the Swedish company Alfa Laval. Alfa Laval, Dr. Gustav de Laval, the founder of Alfa Laval, invented the cream separator. So he patented it and started a company which became today's Alfa Laval. Now, the cream separator didn't stop there. The same separator has been used over the years for separating, let's just say, impurities from the pure liquid. So oil, which is used in an engine, eventually gathers a lot of impurities. And so if you can recover the oil from it, his idea was that you can reuse it. So his slogan was, every drop of oil you save is a drop of oil you don't have to buy. Every drop of oil you save is a drop of oil you don't have to buy. So these are the two slogans that I wanted to say. And the reason for me saying the slogans is that I'm going to focus my 2.5 to 3 minutes ahead on what Dr. Aditya Gupta referred to as mitigation strategies. And I'm going to talk about some very small things which can be done by individual companies, which can add up to a very huge whole if everybody on the planet does it. Okay. Now, this is something that can be done by everybody, literally, and it's not just auto companies. Of course, auto companies have always led the way in terms of bringing in new technologies, bringing in new methodologies, and this is not only in India, but all over the world. So if auto companies start doing this, I'm sure everybody else will follow. And so our dream of everyone doing this will fructify. Now, in keeping with the theme of the webinar, I would like to divide this into the environmental, social, and governance aspects. And I'd like to give two small examples for each one of these. Okay. The first is the environmental aspect. Imagine a container yard at any port. Now, the containers, when they're being offloaded from the ships, have to be inspected. Even when they're loaded, they have to be inspected. Inspected for damages, because there's a lot of liability claims and so on that happen. And it's not only for ships, it's for any means of transport, but I'm just taking an example of a container yard at a port. Most inspection happens visually. There's an operator sitting in a cabin on a crane, and he literally is taken to where the container is at whatever height, wherever it is, and he goes around it and he inspects it. Now, we know that there is rain, there is snow, there are sandstorms, depending on which port we're talking about. There are things that interfere in vision. And so things get delayed, ships get stuck at ports, trucks start queuing up. There's a lot of waste of fuel, there's a lot of waste of time, there's a lot of chances of human errors. Now imagine doing all of this accurately under all conditions, irrespective of whether there's a sandstorm, rain, snow, whatever. That's what technology can do for you today. And this, I'm not talking hypothetical, I'm talking of live ports in the world which are doing this today, using technology. Second example for the environmental, inventory inside a warehouse depends for its accuracy on the items being put away and picked from the correct bins. A wrong put away has tremendous downstream effects in terms of timely picking, excess cost of air freighting, loss of orders, resulting penalties, use of extra resources within and outside the warehouse to maintain customer satisfaction. A wrong pick, on the other hand, can result in customer satisfaction issues, as well as loss of inventory, not to mention inventory inaccuracy. Today, these things can be fixed even before the problem occurs using technology. There are warehouses that are already benefiting from this technology in India. Now let's move to the social aspect. Faster movement of goods through ports, with the example that I mentioned earlier, leads to higher customer satisfaction. Better inventory control in warehouses leads to higher customer satisfaction. Now, higher customer satisfaction leads to better customer retention, better employee satisfaction, and better employee engagement. So it's like a positive cycle that we are kicking in. So important for us to do these things. Also, using technology on the shop floor, in the warehouse, we are able to detect collisions before they happen. We are able to contribute a lot to the safety of the employees on the floor using technology. For instance, if an employee is walking down a path where he's supposed to wear a hard hat and he is not, he can be told in real time that he's walking down a path where he is not supposed to be walking without a hard hat. And that is possible today. It's all technology which is live and can be demonstrated. On the governance aspect, most data, so when you have documents in international shipping, and there's a whole bunch of documents from bill of lading all the way to arrival notices and commercial documents. Now, there is no standardization across the world, absolutely. And so it becomes very difficult for data to be put from these documents into the computer system with any level of accuracy. I think the best people have managed is 65 to 70% accuracy using optical character recognition. Imagine if that can go to near 100%, which means that the data from a document goes into the system without passing through human hands. It's completely automated, directly from the PDF file into the data, into the database. So this is the safest form of data. Think about it. Not touched by human hands, not seen by human eyes, no corruption involved, no bribery, nothing can happen to that data. The data is in its purest form. And also highly encrypted data means safe cyber security practice. So we need to think about that. And to answer your question, Tulsi, Koi Reader started off as a company that can read anything. That's why Koi is the Hindi word for any. So we read anything. Absolutely, in about 30 languages, we can read any document and we can give you accuracy above 95%. And this is for a document that we've never seen before. First time 95% and above accuracy. And the highest others have managed, even the big companies have managed this about 70% maximum. So that's why the company is called Koi Reader, because that forms a key part of our AI technology, which we use to do a lot of other things. Finally, machine-based supervision systems can make sure every pick is the right pick always, which means we are adhering to the pick list and we are protecting the resources of the enterprise at all times. So basically, if you look at all these examples that I gave you, the common theme here is right first time. We want to be right first time, so there is no need to do anything second time, which means we are saving the effort and the energy that's required to do it a second time. If you are right first time, you don't have to spend any more energy after that. And the hashtag that we use to describe all this is hashtag Let's Talk Accuracy. Thank you. Back to you, Tulsi.
Thank you, Vasu. It's coincidental that right first time is also one of our attributes in our organization. We have to get it right first time. I think that's something that really drives us because we're driven by the speed of deliveries.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks very much. But it's fascinating that you are able to read any document in so many languages. I think that lends itself to great transparency and, as you mentioned, a huge contributor to governance. But I'll move on to the next speaker for now, and we'll come back with follow-up questions. And that is Mukundan Sheshadri, who's the founder and CEO of Green Tech. Mr. Mukundan has a long experience of over 2 decades in growth, consulting, change leadership, supply chain, green products and solutions, intellectual property, and professional network space. So that's a vast sphere of knowledge. He is currently the founder and CEO of Green Tech Packaging and Storage Solutions. During the past 7 years, he was the founder, director, investor, and head of companies in the knowledge services and supply chain domains. So, Mukundan, you've had a long experience in diverse areas of environment and sustainability, including many years in Singapore, a country that many of us admire for its ESG. Do you believe that ESG really delivers real benefits to organizations like the automotive industry, or are we just ticking a box that has become mandatory? How can such beneficial practices be perpetuated by organizations? Over to you, Mukundan.
Good evening, Ms. Tulsi. Really a very, very thoughtful question. But before I dwell into the detail, I just want to thank CII organizers for bringing me over here to share my perspective. As I said, I always look at ESG in the analogy of cricket. You have 3 stumps that the batsman has to cover. The batsman is the corporate in this case. So naturally, if you have to stay in the crease, you need to be careful with respect to every one of the 3 stumps. So it's not one stump is important than the other. So ESG from a compliance point of view, it's very critical. Obviously, there will be fines, penalties, bad press, any of that could happen if any of those 3 stumps are weak. So at a very minimal, every corporation, in my view, has to focus on all of these 3 stumps, which will be environment, social, and governance. And there are plenty of good practices. I ran a company called Flexol Packaging. Fortunately, I have Ashok Leland, who are our first customers in the call as well, Madhusudan as well. So from a very, very basic compliance point of view, all the 3 stumps have to be protected. But that is not all. The batsman has to score. So if he just ducks every ball and saves the stump, that's not going to take him anywhere, or not the team. So I always feel that it has to generate value. If ESG doesn't generate value, obviously it will become a fad very soon. So I've seen best practices in the Indian industry, and of course in developed markets like Japan, Singapore, US, and all that, where I've lived and worked. But coming back, I feel that the value that ESG can generate can be phenomenal, just that we are not recognizing it as of yet. If you ask me the question, are we just ticking a box or is it real? I would not get into a specific, but I think 1 out of every 5 organizations where the senior leadership gets involved right up front in terms of framing the policy, in terms of providing the tools to the decision makers, in terms of making sure that is a way of life in the company. I think those companies score much higher in the ESG scorecard than some of the other companies which may be viewing it more as a cost than a value. I just want to bring one example. Like India, basically, I think is a very diverse country. We all know there's huge potential. Make in India, all of these schemes are coming in. I think we need to pick up ESG as a topic whereby some of the practices, I've seen practices like very simple, the previous speakers were also talking about, Vasu was talking about. I've seen water consumption in a canteen being controlled through a straw kind of a system, whereby most minimal water alone comes out that can be used. Now, in that company, I saw that they were saving a couple of 25,000 liters of water a day. That compounds to something. But when I went to one of the associate companies of the same company, promoted by the same group, I didn't find that practice being adopted. So which means what they follow on the left hand, the right hand did not know. So to answer your question, can it generate value? Absolutely yes. And should it be just viewed only as a compliance kind of this thing? No, the compliance is very important to avoid fines, penalties, or bad press, but that is not going to take the company forward. What is really going to take that forward is if every ESG audit can be converted to not only identifying red, green, yellow, however, a business opportunity that lies within every one of the facets of ESG, I think that would be the value creation that that company can look to in terms of positioning ESG as a value creator rather than a cost element.
Thank you, Mukundan. But just a follow-up question to you. If we are looking at ESG being a value creator, and if you're looking at a business audit, perhaps that that could be utilized where it is easily recognizable. If there is one important recommendation that you would like CII, for instance, to submit to the government in support of ESG, that would really set us apart as a country and contribute to the Make in India vision. How can we have that mark, that one mark that would give us the edge that there is an audit undertaken, this organization can tick all the boxes, and this is the organization that would be the preferred organization? What would that recommendation be?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think I'll answer it in two parts. First off, I think rather than follow a Western practice, which is what we are used to, I think it is time we recognize that we could be the creator of something that is first of its kind. I saw that happening when we labeled the food as green and red dots. So when, in most of the hotels now follow that schema, whereby a green dot is put on a vegetarian item and a red dot is put on a non-vegetarian item. I was recently in Singapore, but I still find that that has not been adopted globally. Or maybe we didn't take it forward globally. I still find people writing within bracket V kind of thing. So very similar to that concept, I feel we need to take the leadership in terms of championing ESG and convey that to the world in a very simple tag format or any format, I'm saying. For example, if we can standardize, and there are a lot of metrics that are being followed by many companies. I'm aware the publicly traded companies follow certain metrics. There are scorecards inside companies, like I know about Ashok Leyland. So we don't need to recreate any of these metrics that will lead us to a score of a ESG, which means the health of that ESG organization within that organization can easily be deciphered by looking at some of the measures that they're already in place. It is just that we need to be able to articulate that in one simple format and then show it to the world that if you do business with this company, we are probably in the top quartile of the ESG matrix. So my recommendation, my suggestion would be that I think it is time we start to think that ESG is of value, and we should be in a position to communicate that value through a very simple format, and without changing everything, without putting in new standards or formats or templates. We would adopt some of the best practices that are already there in the industry, which are being followed by probably the top 200, 300 companies. Pick up one metric from E, S, and G, and then sigma them, and then convert that into a format that is easily readable or understandable. It could mean as simple as a tag that we put on every product that is made in India, which conveys to the world that this product not only is made in India, but also made by a company that is ESG compliant, or that is ESG top quartile. So my suggestion would be that rather than reinventing anything, just adopt some of the practices that are already been in place with established companies, make that as a standard, and then make most of the smaller, medium-sized companies, which are basically the suppliers to these OEs, or exporters by themselves adopt to this easiest form of communication, so that we can really be the first in the world to kind of make a business sense out of the ESG rather than simply see it as a compliance area.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mukundan. You know, that's an excellent suggestion. And I think this is where Mr. Vasu comes in. You know, perhaps something could be innovated in that area. But coming back to you, Mr. Vasu, I mean, I'm going to change tack here, and I'm going to focus on the S of ESG. So my question to you is, would automation render routine jobs redundant? It's so effective. So how would that impact the S of ESG? How do you see the jobs of the future in logistics if automation is going to take over? And what would be the implications in terms of skill development of the existing workforce? Would they be all out of a job? How can we handle that? Just your views on that, Mr. Vasu.
Sure. So short answer, no. I don't think automation is going to render people jobless. It certainly is going to make their work more productive. It certainly is going to, so for example, the example that I gave of inventory control. Now, if an operator, if a forklift operator is about to put away material in the wrong bin in a warehouse, the automation system that we have implemented is going to tell him in his ear that he's putting it in the wrong place in real time. It's going to tell him where to put it. Okay, so he still needed. It's not as if he is being disposed to it. He is being told where to, so it's an assistant to him. So most of the automation systems that we are talking about are systems that can assist people do their job better. Now, your question about training, in this particular example, not required, because it's going to talk to him in a language that he understands. So, I mean, it's just going to help him make mistakes. As simple as that, because we want to be right first time, right? So, I think automation overall somehow has created this impression that people are going to lose their jobs. But I don't, at least in examples where we have seen, where we have implemented, I don't think people have lost any jobs. So the short answer, like I said earlier, is no.
Thank you. That's very heartening, actually, because sometimes we think that automation would take over the entire distribution, the logistics, at least a large part of it, and therefore we need to look at maybe people being reskilled and redeployed into other areas. So really, we are talking about automation, therefore being adapted to focus on productivity, increase in productivity rather than displacing the human.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Vasu. I think we have time for a few more questions. So I'll go back to you, Mr. Khare, and that is, you know, you talk about the commitment to reduction of carbon emissions. So while we've seen many large organizations globally, and even we are committed to a reduction to net zero emission by 2050, do you see that same kind of commitment possible, for instance, in the automotive industry in India? And what more can be done? Because we haven't, for instance, even reached a stage where, you know, there is, you can say, a focus on alternative fuel. Or when we are looking at electric vehicles, do you think in the next 5 years we would have sufficient production of vehicles that would take care of that, and that would also handle the environment? You know what Mr. Madhusudan was talking about, you know, that when we are looking at green technology, we are not only looking at the product, we are also looking at the procurement and whether that conforms to the environment norms. So what are your views on the commitment of the industry to the net zero emission? You're
So,
on mute.
yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I see very, very heartening things happening very recently. Tata as a group, Tata Industries, they've also signed this agreement that by 2045, they want to be carbon neutral. Mahindra has already done this job. So people are already on the way. All the other global corporations. And main thing is that being a globalized world today only BYD has launched their vehicles in India. Electric vehicles have been launched very recently, just today itself. Mercedes produced the first electric vehicle, luxury vehicle, just a couple of weeks back in India. And we are also here in form of our Porsches and Audis and electric vehicles. And we are coming in the mass market also. So it's a matter of people will get left out if they do not do it. Because these new vehicles, the new technology certainly is going to be much more cost effective in the long term. Whether it's electric or it's hydrogen or it's alternate fuels. Yesterday, only Toyota's brought, Mr. Gadkari, was inaugurating a new vehicle which is working totally on alternate fuels, bio-based fuels, 100% bio-based fuel vehicles. A lot of these developments are happening and the direction is very much positive. A lot of recognition is there in the country on this topic. So I don't think that people can do it. And we are all certainly, as a major manufacturer, we are playing our part. As a German LKSG law, we are responsible for all the compliances, even at our tier 1 supply chain. So if our logistics service provider or if it is our tier 1 manufacturer who's not really committing to ESG, we are going to be accountable for that in some way or other. So we believe, we as a major manufacturer will have to drive this process. In a globalized world, it's not possible that you remain isolated. And I would just like to, just to add up, because safety was one topic, which is one important area, but I would not like to miss it out. Automation is certainly going to help. And that's where autonomous cars started, that assuming that the driver is the most dangerous part in the car, in the vehicle, and who can create the accidents. So they started working on that project, but in India, the transition is going to pay a very, very long time. As you said, speed is very, very important. And given the scale of operations and the complexity of the entire operations, there are so many manual jobs happening in this whole process. We in our organization, 100% we've got electric forklifts, tow trucks, electric internal vehicle movement. But more than that, we find that a lot of accidents keep on happening because of interface of man and machine. And that level of awareness and the trainings which is required has to go up. And this has to be really a recommendation to the government that they have to work on this topic. I'll just recount of 2-3 accidents, where one accident which happened 10 years back, a person from Bangalore to Gurgaon had come on a truck, and at morning at 9 o'clock, his cleaner was stopped at the gate saying that he's not wearing a safety shoe. So this person goes inside alone, and within 15 minutes, he was trying to park a vehicle, and he was reversing the vehicle, and while reversing the vehicle, his head was out, and it collided with the pillar. The person died on the spot. Later upon the time we were doing the detailed analysis of this topic, we found that pillar obviously was at the wrong place. But this person had not slept for 3 days because his contractor had told him, if you come within 3 days of time, you will get 15,000 rupees extra as a bonus. So how do we manage a driver, his trainings? How do you manage the vehicle? Now, today's date, the vehicles are available where they can sense and see if the person is sleepy, then there is an alarm and he can be woken up. Whether the alternate driver, he is getting adequate sleep or not. We had implemented the system that there should be alternate drivers available. How do we manage the vehicle? How many is the driver? How do you manage the the journey management as well as the management of the contract part? So all these areas need to be worked out. Same thing if you see within the warehouse operations. There are a number of cases where the forklift accidents have really ended up in fatalities. So these are very, very important issues which lead to loss of a lot of productivity as well as safety. And this is an important social topic also. This is one area which I will always recommend that we should work on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanjay. Madhusudanan, I have a question for you. You know, there are lots of great initiatives that you spoke about that are being implemented in your organization. But do you see as an industry that, you know, there is a long-term focus for ESG that would really deliver benefits? We spoke about the auto industry. Now, the auto industry, though it contributes considerably to India's GDP, I think unless we reach that inflection point where everyone is working towards the same ends, we really won't achieve what we desire to at the end of a few years. So do you see that happening not only for your company, for the auto industry, and therefore for it being rolled out across major industries at least?
Yes, Tulsi. I definitely see a long-term focus on ESG is going to result in benefit to not just companies like us representing the OEM, but the entire automotive supply chain. Before I delve into the topic, very pertinent points told by the other co-panelist, Mr. Mukundan. I think he brought the aspect on ESG should not be a tick in the box. So when it comes to policy making, we are quite good at, but when it comes to enforcement, we make it in such a way that we make the corporates guilty of practicing it. So I think there should be a transparent and simple mechanism. I think SEBI is mandating the BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, and also the BRSR Lite module. With careful digitalization and the ease of use, it should be user-friendly and it should be easy to do that. Like what Vasu Ramanujam told, it should be very pure, it should be far from corruption, and it should be automated in such a way that it is very easy to handle and people don't get into the enforcement tangle. This is very, very key. And very pertinent point of Sanjay talked about how we can switch over to renewables and clean energy technologies without investment. In fact, Ashok Leyland has done that to solar by partnering with Hinduja Renewables, where we are able to get solar energy at 3.6 rupees, whereas the grid supplies at 8 rupees at zero capex. So there are many solutions. And in fact, the Ahmedabad electric vehicles of Ashok Leyland are running through the EMAS solution, electric mobility as a solution, where the government doesn't have to buy the electric vehicles upfront because the acquisition cost of an electric vehicle is going to be higher. So it reduces the entry barrier of supplying cleaner technologies and enable people to use such technologies. Now, getting onto the focus, I would like to touch upon 4 important points. First is, I touched upon the aspect of cost. ESG as a value enabler and a cost driver. So I definitely see that by implementing ESG practices, we are definitely going to have saving in terms of cost of operations. If you look at renewable energy use, if you increase it, apart from reducing the GHG, it is also going to save the power bills by water recycling, by energy productivity, and also by recycling the parts. So we are going to use less of virgin materials and more of recycled materials, and over a long period, initially to set up the systems and all these things, it might add up to delta cost for implementing the ESG. But on the long run, I feel that by implementing these cleaner technology measures and circular economy, the cost is going to come down. So ESG being looked at as a compliance mechanism meeting a regulatory framework will also be used as a competitive edge among the organization. This is point number 2. Point number 1. Point number 2 is ESG boosts investor confidence. I see that companies who have focused on ESG enjoys investors' confidence, which enables them to have capital at lower cost, lower insurance premiums, and also interest rates at lower rates. So this will help us, the organization, to build on the margin. So you don't lose on the cost. So you might invest on the framework, but eventually you are going to increase the margins because there is going to be stickiness of the investors with the organization, and also they are going to trust you and going to give you capital at lower interest rates. This is point number 2. Point number 3 is ESG focused organizations, as we have seen in the last 20 years, and even the way Dow Jones Sustainability Index is monitoring them, the volatility of the ESG focused companies have been very minimal, and the long-term gains of the ESG focused organizations have given better returns and value compared to the Nifty average. That's what we have seen. So it is going to give better shareholder value as well as the stakeholder value. So it is going to benefit the investors who are investing on the companies. Last but not the least, it is going to enjoy ESG based organization going to have higher goodwill in terms of the community, the customers, and the employees. If you look at a trend amongst the millennials, the Gen Zs, unlike our generation, they are all interested in working with companies who are not just looking at profit, but they are focused on the planet and the purpose and the people. So they want to work with purpose-driven organizations and which are contributing to the planet and people. So triple P bottom Nile is a word which was coined 25 years before by John Elkington, but now it is taking shape through the new word ESG, but it is not a new terminology. We have been using it for 25 years. Ethical organization have been practicing it in different ways. Now it has got energy and then it is coming centrally and being governed centrally. I feel that by practicing ESG, I think more customers will come to you, more investors will come to you, and then you will also be able to attract talent and you will be able to retain them. That's my take on the long-term benefits of ESG. Tulsi.
Thank you, Madhusudanan. There are two questions and we just have 5 minutes more. So maybe anyone who would like to respond to them in just a minute, I'll read out the first question. Whether moving from fossil fuels to renewable energy in the automotive sector is really gaining on carbon credits of our nation without completely moving in our power generation origin. Okay, so I think what is being asked here is whether we are really moving in the right direction in terms of renewable energy. Would anyone like to take that question?
No, he is very much right, because just reducing the tailpipe emissions will not solve the problem. We have to have the proper charging infrastructure which is based out of renewable energy. And I think our Prime Minister is really pushing forward the mission of renewable energy, targeting some 450 gigawatts by the end of the decade. So that's what things are moving little in the right direction, I'll say. Not immediate, but they are going to be available.
Yes. So therefore, the question that would arise is, what is the quality of our power generation? What is the source and how are we going to handle that? I think that is the big challenge before us. Okay, the second question is buyback of old cars, trucks and carriers by OEMs based on their end of life, like stopping of producing Bharat Stage 3 engines, can be useful for reduction in pollution. Are there any future ideas in these areas?
I would like to take.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead, Sanjay.
No.
This is your circular, your circularity at work, I guess. But please, either of you.
Big plans is already in the place. I know totally very well. Maruti and Toyota to show they have set up recycling plants. Same thing about Mahindra. They have put up recycling plants. So these companies are already doing buyback of the vehicles. And as what Mr. Gadkari has the plan that every 50 kilometers there should be a vehicle recycling facility available to us, so that we can really take out the resource out of that and just you can use it back into the production process of the circular economy process. The policies are going to be in place. In places like Europe, this is already very much in place. Our vehicles are more or less more than 95% of it is recyclable, whatever is the existing design. So I think the direction is right. Only thing is that how speedy it can happen, that depends.
Adding on to what Sanjay told, we have a scrappage policy in place, but that is voluntary in nature. But slowly, as we see that if government pushes to a mandatory scrappage policy, I think that comes with pushback from the customer community as well. Possibly this will increase and it will give tremendous boost to the performance and efficiency of the overall logistics market, because if you look at an Euro 0 vehicle compared to an Euro 6 vehicle, almost one Euro 0 vehicle pollutes equivalent to 35 to 40 vehicles of the present vehicle what we are making. So it is equally important not to see the new technology, but also remove the older technologies from the market which are doing enough damage to the ecosystem and overall to the efficiency.
Thank you very much. And with that, we the end of our session. I must say that it's been a tremendously enriching experience for me. And I'd like to thank each one of you, Dr. Gupta, Madhusudanan, Mr. Sanjay Khare, Vasu, and Mukundan. It's really been tremendous what you have been doing in your domains. I think there's a lot that we can learn from you. But if there's one takeaway, I think it's impossible to summarize all in one sentence. But I think I'd just like to say that you've said that really there is value. ESG is a value creator. And what we can do is create something that could be one of its kind, a format, I think Mr. Mukundan mentioned that, a format that is easily readable, where technology can play a part and which can really set us apart as a nation. I think that is something that we can really work towards and see that whatever we are implementing would get value, as Dr. Gupta mentioned, that it would get value for the future generation. So thank you very much to each one of the panelists, to our sponsors, to CII, for really a very interesting session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks a lot.
everybody. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bhanumati, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.